At my sister's wedding, I caught my wife and my brother-in-law in the middle of an affair. I turned to my sister, and she simply winked and said, "Relax, the show is just getting started." The morning of my sister's wedding, I ironed my own shirt. I remember this because it was the kind of small, unremarkable task that stays with you when everything else falls apart. The hiss of the steam, the careful press along the collar, the way I'd folded it just so and hung it on the back of the bathroom door. Laura was still asleep. She'd stayed up late the night before, something about last minute details with Megan, seating charts or flowers or one of those emergencies that weddings seem to generate like static electricity. I didn't mind. I've always been an early riser, and there was something peaceful about the hotel room at 6 a.m. The curtains filtering gray November light, the distant sound of the ocean through glass that didn't quite seal. I made coffee with the little machine on the dresser. The pods were stale, but I drank it anyway, standing by the window in my boxers, watching the groundskeepers rake leaves from the venue lawn 3 stories below. They moved with that unhurried efficiency of people who've done the same job 1,000 times. I envied them, in a way. Their day was simple. Mine was supposed to be celebratory, joyful, all the things a brother feels when his only sister marries the man she loves. Supposed to be. I didn't know then what the day would become. I was just a man ironing his shirt, drinking bad coffee, thinking about his speech. I'd written it 3 times, scrapped it twice, and settled on something simple. A story about Megan and me as kids. The way she'd always believed in things fiercely, completely. The way she'd once saved a bird with a broken wing and cried for a week when it died anyway. I wanted to capture that about her. The tenderness, the stubbornness, the way she loved without reservation. I thought I understood her. Laura woke around 8. She stretched, smiled at me with that sleepy warmth she had in the mornings, and I brought her coffee in bed. We'd been married 4 years, not long in the scheme of things, but long enough that I thought I knew the rhythms of her. The way she hummed while brushing her teeth, the yee, the particular sighs she made when she was tired, the way she reached for my hand in crowds without looking, like it was instinct. "Nervous?" she asked, sitting up against the pillows. "A little, the speech. You'll be fine. You're always fine." She said it casually, dismissively almost, the way you reassure someone about something that doesn't really matter. I remember thinking she seemed distracted, her eyes flicking to her phone on the nightstand, but I didn't ask. Weddings are stressful. She and Megan had become close over the years. Closer than I'd expected, actually, given how different they were. Laura was reserved where Megan was effusive, practical where my sister was romantic. But they'd found something between them, some private language of glances and inside jokes that I'd always assumed was just women being women, building those intimate friendships that men seem constitutionally incapable of. I kissed her forehead and went to shower. The ceremony was at 4, and we spent the morning apart, Laura with the bridal party, me with the groomsmen, and Derek's suite 2 floors up. Derek was Megan's fiance, a corporate lawyer with a firm handshake and a habit of checking his watch even when he wasn't late for anything. I'd never quite warmed to him, but I'd never found a reason to object either. He was successful, he was stable. He looked at Megan the way men in movies look at women they love. Maybe that should have been enough. His best man was a college friend I'd never met, a guy named Trent who kept making jokes about strippers and seemed genuinely disappointed when the morning turned out to be mimosas and ESPN instead. Derek's father was there too, a quiet man with silver hair who sat in the corner reading the newspaper like he'd wandered into the wrong room and was too polite to leave. And I stood by the window again, watching the caterers set up white chairs on the lawn below. Rows and rows of them, perfectly aligned, like teeth. "You good, Marcus?" Derek asked, coming to stand beside me. He had a mimosa in one hand, his phone in the other. "Good, just thinking." "About?" "Nothing, everything." I shrugged. "My sister's getting married. It's strange." "Good strange?" "I don't know yet." He laughed, but it didn't reach his eyes. There was something tight in his expression, something I couldn't name. I thought it was nerves. Grooms get nervous. It's expected. "She's lucky," I said. "Megan, to have found someone. We're both lucky." He said it like a line he'd rehearsed, which maybe it was. I didn't press. We stood there in silence for a while, watching the chairs multiply below, and I tried to shake the feeling that I was missing something obvious. The ceremony itself was beautiful. Megan was radiant. There's no other word for it. She walked down the aisle on my father's arm, her dress a cascade of ivory and lace, her face luminous, with a joy so pure it almost hurt to look at. My mother cried. Laura cried. I felt my throat tighten when Megan looked at me as she passed, mouthing, "I love you," like a secret. I loved her too. That was the thing. I loved her so completely that I would have done anything to protect her, to keep her safe, to ensure her happiness. I've been doing it since we were children, shielding her from bullies, from heartbreak, from our parents' divorce when I was 15 and she was 12, and neither of us understood why the world had cracked open beneath our feet. She trusted me. That was the part that would haunt me later. She trusted me, and I trusted the people I'd brought into her life. The vows were traditional. Derek's voice was steady. Megan's broke beautifully on the word forever. The officiant pronounced them husband and wife, and the crowd erupted in applause. And I watched my baby sister kiss her husband for the first time as a married woman, and I felt nothing. Not nothing exactly, but a numbness where joy should have been, a wrongness I couldn't explain. I attributed it to melancholy, to the bittersweet ache of watching someone you've protected your whole life step beyond your protection into a future you can't control. I didn't know then that my instincts were trying to tell me something. I didn't listen. The reception was in the estate's grand ballroom, a converted barn with exposed beams and fairy lights strung like constellations across the ceiling. There were 200 guests, most of whom I knew by face, if not by name. Relatives, family friends, colleagues from Derek's firm, a scattering of Megan's coworkers from the design studio where she spent her days making other people's visions beautiful. Laura found me at the bar after cocktail hour. "You okay?" she asked, sliding her hand into mine. Her palm was cool, her fingers slim. She was wearing a navy dress I'd never seen before, something elegant and understated, and her hair was pinned up in a way that showed the curve of her neck. "Fine, just tired. You look tense." "I'm fine, Laura." She didn't push. She rarely did. That was one of the things I'd loved about her. Her willingness to let me have my silences, my moods, my private corners. But standing there in that beautiful room with my wife's hand in mine, I felt a distance between us I couldn't name. Like we were actors in a play, hitting our marks, saying our lines, but no longer remembering why the scene mattered. "I should find Megan," she said. "She wanted to talk before dinner." "About what?" "I don't know. Sister-in-law stuff." She smiled, squeezed my hand, and disappeared into the crowd. I watched her go, the sway of her hips, the confident click of her heels on the hardwood floor, and felt something cold settle in my chest. I ordered a whiskey. Then another. My speech was scheduled for after dinner, between the salads and the entrees, a slot Megan had specifically requested because she said she wanted to actually hear it, not be too drunk or too full or too tired, to appreciate her brother's words. I'd practiced it a dozen times. I knew every beat, every pause, every moment where I was supposed to smile or let my voice crack with emotion. I was ready. Except that when I stood up from my seat and felt 200 pairs of eyes turned toward me, I couldn't find Laura. It was a small thing, insignificant even. People get up during weddings. They use the restroom, step outside for air, check their phones in the hallway. But I'd expected her to be there, in her seat beside mine, watching me with that small, encouraging smile she always gave when I did something that made me vulnerable. She wasn't there. Derek wasn't there either. I noticed it like you notice a crack in a mirror, suddenly, completely, with the understanding that once you've seen it, you can never unsee it. The two empty chairs, side by side in my mental map of the room, though in reality they were at opposite ends of the head table. Derek's seat by Megan, Laura's seat by me. Both empty, both gone. I gave my speech anyway. I don't remember what I said. I remember Megan laughing, crying, mouthing, "I love you" again when I finished. I remember the applause. I remember sitting down and feeling my hands shake beneath the table where no one could see. I remember thinking, "Where's my wife?" I found them in the coat room. Not immediately. First, I went to the restrooms, both of them, men's and women's, standing outside the doors like a fool waiting for someone who wasn't coming. Then I checked the patio, where a few smokers had gathered in the November chill, their breath mingling with tobacco and white clouds. Then the parking lot, though I wasn't sure what I expected to find there. Our rental car was where we'd left it. Derek's Tesla was parked beside it, gleaming and silent. The coat room was an afterthought, a small room off the main hallway, intended for guests to store their jackets during the reception. I only checked it because I'd run out of other places to look. Because the alternative was to return to my seat and pretend nothing was wrong, and I wasn't ready to pretend. The door was closed, but not locked. I opened it. They were standing in the narrow space between racks of coats, Laura's back pressed against the wall, Derek's hands on either side of her face. They weren't kissing, not when I walked in, but there was an intimacy in their posture that required no imagination to interpret. Her lipstick was smudged, his tie was loosened. They looked at me with expressions I will never forget. Laura's wide-eyed and guilty, Derek's calm, almost annoyed, like I'd interrupted a business meeting. "Marcus," Laura said. Just my name, as if that explained anything. I didn't speak. I couldn't. There's a moment when the world splits open, when everything you thought you knew reveals itself to be a lie, where language simply fails. Words are built for a world that makes sense. This didn't. I stood there. I looked at my wife. I looked at my sister's husband. And I understood, slowly like a photograph developing in acid, that this was not an accident. This was not a moment of weakness. There was a familiarity between them, a comfort that only comes from repetition. This had happened before, many times. I don't know how long I stood there. Seconds, hours. Time had become unreliable. Derek was the first to move. He straightened his tie with practiced hands, stepped past me as if I were furniture, and said, "We should get back. People will notice." He said it to Laura, not to me, like I wasn't even there. Like I was a problem to be managed, not a person whose life he'd just detonated. Laura looked at me. Her eyes were wet, but not with tears, more like the sheen of panic, of calculation, of someone running through options and finding them all bad. "Marcus, I can explain." "Don't." My voice didn't sound like my own. It was flat, airless. The voice of a man who has just realized that the ground beneath his feet was never solid, that he's been standing on ice his whole life without knowing it. "We'll talk later," she said. "After, when things are calmer." "Calmer? Please, just not here. Not at your sister's wedding." She was appealing to my decency, to my love for Megan, to the part of me that would rather suffer in silence than cause a scene. She knew me well enough to know it might work. It almost did. I returned to the reception. I sat in my seat. I ate the entree without tasting it. I clapped when other people gave speeches. I smiled when Megan looked at me from the head table, beaming with that innocent happiness that would be destroyed if I opened my mouth. Laura returned a few minutes after I did, sliding into her seat beside me like nothing had happened. She reached for my hand under the table. I pulled away. "Marcus," she whispered, "not now. We need to—" I said not now. She fell silent. I could feel her vibrating beside me. That particular frequency of fear and guilt and damage control, part of me, the part that had loved her for 4 years, that had built a life with her, that had believed in the story we'd told ourselves, wanted to hear her out, wanted there to be an explanation that made this okay, that reframed everything I'd seen into something survivable. But there was another part of me, a newer part, born in that coat room, cold and clear-eyed, and already beginning to understand that the explanation didn't matter. The act mattered. The choice mattered. The fact that my wife and my sister's husband had stood in that room, pressed together like lovers, while 200 people celebrated a marriage that was already a lie. I looked at Derek at the head table. He was laughing at something Megan had said, his arm draped over the back of her chair, the picture of a devoted groom. He didn't look at me. Not once. Megan did, though she caught my eye across the room and smiled, that luminous, trusting smile, and I felt something crack inside me. I had to tell her. But first, I had to get through the rest of the reception. The first dance, the parent dances, the cutting of the cake, the bouquet toss that Laura didn't participate in, citing a headache that I knew was really just an excuse to avoid standing near me in public. The garter retrieval that Derek performed with exaggerated showmanship, sliding his hands up Megan's leg while guests whooped and cheered, and I stood in the back of the room, my whiskey untouched, watching the performance of a man who had no shame. I kept waiting for someone to notice, for a guest to pull me aside and ask if I was okay, for the wrongness I felt to manifest externally, to become visible, to shatter the illusion the way I couldn't bring myself to do. No one noticed. The music played, the dancing continued. The night went on as if nothing had changed, as if the coat room didn't exist, as if my wife hadn't been pressed against a wall by my sister's husband while vows were still fresh on his lips. I thought about leaving, just walking out, getting in the rental car and driving until I ran out of road or gas or the will to keep going. But Megan would notice my absence. She'd worry, she'd call, and I couldn't tell her the truth over the phone. So I stayed. I watched. I waited. It was nearly midnight when I finally found a moment alone with my sister. She was on the patio, taking a break from the dancing, her shoes kicked off and her bare feet on the cold stone. The November air was sharp, but she didn't seem to notice. She was flushed with champagne and happiness, her eyes bright, her smile easy. "Hey you," she said when I stepped outside. "Where have you been hiding?" "Around. It's a big venue. You're not avoiding me, are you?" "Never." She laughed and patted the space beside her on the stone bench. I sat. For a moment, we were just two kids again, brother and sister, sharing a silence that didn't need to be filled. "Thank you," she said finally, "for your speech. It was perfect." "I meant every word. I know you did. That's what made it perfect." She reached over and squeezed my hand. "I love you, Marcus. You know that, right? Even when I'm terrible at showing it. Even when I get wrapped up in my own life and forget to call, I love you. I love you too, Meg. I'm so happy. I didn't think I could be this happy." She looked out at the dark lawn, but the fairy lights reflected in her eyes. "Derek he's everything. He's solid, reliable. I've never felt so safe." I didn't say anything. I couldn't. "I know you two aren't best friends," she continued. "I know you think he's a little stiff. But he's good, Marcus. He's good to me. He makes me feel like I matter." "Meg." "What?" I looked at her, my baby sister, my oldest friend, the person I'd spent my whole life trying to protect, and I opened my mouth to tell her, to shatter everything, to reveal the man she'd just married for the fraud he was. And she winked at me. "Relax," she said. "The show is just getting started." I didn't understand at first. The wink was wrong, the tone was wrong. The words themselves, "the show is just getting started," made no sense in the context of a bride on her wedding night, taking a quiet moment with her brother. "What?" I managed. Megan's smile didn't waver, but something behind it shifted. A door opening, a mask slipping, a glimpse of something I'd never seen before. "I know," she said, "about Derek and Laura. I've known for a long time." The cold from the stone bench seeped through my pants, into my skin, into my bones. I felt frozen, not from the temperature. "You know?" "Since the beginning, since before the engagement, actually." She said it casually, lightly, the way you might mention a change in dinner plans. "They've been sleeping together for almost 2 years. Did you really think I didn't notice? 2 years? Give or take." I stared at her. My sister. The woman I thought I knew better than anyone. The girl who'd cried over a dead bird, who'd believed in fairy tales, who'd trusted me to protect her from a world that didn't deserve her softness. "Why?" My voice cracked on the word. "Why would you marry him? Why would you go through with this if you knew?" She tilted her head, studying me with eyes that suddenly seemed much older, much colder than I remembered. "Because, Marcus, some shows require a proper stage." She told me everything, not all at once, in pieces, over the course of that cold hour on the patio, while the reception wound down inside and guests said their goodbyes, and Laura texted me 17 times asking where I was. Derek's family was wealthy, old money, the kind of money that came with trust funds and family businesses and a web of financial entanglements too complex for a simple divorce to unravel. Megan had done her research. She knew that Derek had cheated before, not just with Laura, but with half a dozen other women over the years. She knew that his father had bailed him out of 2 separate scandals, paying off mistresses with NDAs and hush money that made the problems disappear. She also knew that a prenup had been drafted, a prenup that Derek had insisted upon, that protected his family's assets, that would have left Megan with nothing if they divorced within the first 5 years. "So I changed the terms," she said. "I had my own lawyer look at it, made some modifications before I signed. Derek was too arrogant to read the fine print. Modifications? Infidelity clauses. Detailed and specific. If he cheats during the marriage, and I have proof, I get everything. The house, half the trust fund, a monthly settlement that would make your head spin. She smiled. And I have proof. Lots of it. Photos, emails. A very informative conversation recorded at the rehearsal dinner when Derek thought he was alone with your wife in the wine cellar. I felt sick. You recorded them? I documented everything. For 2 years, Marcus. Every hotel receipt, every text message, every time your wife snuck out of your bed to meet my husband in some parking garage or borrowed apartment. She paused. Did you really think I was stupid? Did you really think I didn't see what was right in front of me? I didn't answer. I couldn't. The wedding was the final piece, she continued. I needed them to be married first. I needed the commitment, the legal binding, the witnesses and the ceremony and the vows he made in front of 200 people, because now, love, when I file for divorce, it won't just be a scandal. It will be spectacular. Megan, he humiliated me, Marcus. For 2 years, he lied to my face and fucked your wife behind my back, and he thought I was too naive to notice, too trusting, too in love to see what was happening. Her voice hardened. He was wrong. I sat in silence for a long time after she finished. The patio had emptied. Inside, the music had stopped, and I could hear the caterers packing up, the clatter of dishes and glassware. Somewhere, Laura was probably looking for me. Somewhere, Derek was probably celebrating his wedding night, secure in the belief that his secrets were still secrets. And Laura, I asked finally, what happens to her? Megan looked at me. For just a moment, something softer flickered behind her eyes. Sympathy, maybe, or pity. That's your choice, Marcus. I'm not going to tell you what to do with your marriage. But you knew. For 2 years you knew. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to believe that if my sister had come to me 2 years ago and told me my wife was having an affair with her fiancé, I would have listened, would have investigated, would have trusted her over the woman I'd chosen to spend my life with. But I wasn't sure. That was the horrible truth. I wasn't sure I would have believed her. I needed the proof, Megan said, reading my silence correctly. I needed it to be undeniable, and I needed you to see it for yourself, so that when everything falls apart, you'll know I was trying to protect you too, in my own way. Protect me by letting me live a lie for 2 years. Protect you by giving you an exit. Clean and clear. No ambiguity, no maybe she didn't mean it, or maybe I misunderstood. You saw them tonight. You know what they are. She leaned forward. I gave you the truth, Marcus. What you do with it is up to you. I found Laura in the hotel lobby. She was sitting on a velvet sofa near the elevators, her shoes in her hands, her makeup smeared from crying. When she saw me, she stood up so quickly she almost fell. Marcus, thank God. Where have you been? And I've been. I know everything. She stopped. The words hung between us like smoke. I know about you and Derek. I know how long it's been. I know about the hotel receipts and the parking garages and the wine cellar at the rehearsal dinner. I kept my voice flat, controlled, the voice of a man who has already made his decision. I know, Laura. She didn't deny it. That was the thing that surprised me most. Not the affair, not the duration, not the calculated cruelty of it, but the fact that when confronted with the truth, she didn't even try to lie. Who told you? She asked. Does it matter? It was Megan, wasn't it? A strange expression crossed her face. Not guilt, not fear, but something almost like admiration. God, I always underestimated her. Everyone did, Laura laughed. It was a hollow sound, bitter and tired. She played us both, all of us. Derek thinks he's so smart, thinks he's been getting away with it, and the whole time she was... She broke off, shaking her head. Jesus! Why? The question came out before I could stop it. Why did you do it? If you were unhappy, if you wanted someone else, why not just tell me? Why not just leave? She looked at me for a long moment. Her eyes were red, her face blotched, and for just a second I saw the woman I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd laughed at my bad jokes and held my hand in crowds and made me believe that maybe, just maybe, I'd found something real. Then she shrugged. I don't know, she said. I really don't. At first, it was just exciting, different. Derek was so confident, so sure of himself, and you were always so careful, so considerate. It felt like an adventure, a secret. She paused. And then it became a habit. And then it was too late to stop without blowing everything up. So you kept going. I kept going. I waited for the anger to come, the rage, the heartbreak, the flood of emotion that was supposed to accompany a moment like this. But there was nothing. Just that cold, clear emptiness that had been growing inside me since the coat room. I want a divorce, I said. She flinched. Marcus, there's nothing to discuss. I'll have papers drawn up next week. You can keep the apartment until you find somewhere else. I'll stay with a friend. Can't we at least talk about this? Can't we? No, I said it gently, without heat. The way you might tell someone that a door is locked, that there's no point in trying the handle again. She started to cry. Real tears this time, not the performative kind. And I understood in that moment that she wasn't crying because she'd lost me. She was crying because she'd been caught, because the adventure was over and the consequences were beginning and there was no one left to shield her from them. I walked past her to the elevator. I didn't look back. The divorce was finalized 4 months later. It was easier than I expected. Laura didn't contest anything. She was too busy dealing with the fallout of Megan's nuclear strike, which came 2 weeks after the wedding in the form of a divorce filing that made the local news. Prominent attorney's marriage implodes amid cheating scandal, the headlines read. Derek's family tried to suppress it, but Megan had timed her release perfectly, leaking just enough to the press to make the story irresistible while keeping the worst of the evidence in reserve for the courtroom. The infidelity clause held. Every modification Megan had made to the prenup was legal, binding, and airtight. Derek's lawyers fought it for months, but in the end, she walked away with more money than either of us had ever imagined, and Derek walked away with nothing but the ruins of his reputation. I didn't see much of Megan during that time. We talked on the phone occasionally, brief, functional conversations about logistics and timelines and whether I needed anything. She never apologized for keeping me in the dark. I never asked her to. The truth was, I didn't know how to feel about what she'd done. Part of me admired it. The planning, the patience, the cold precision of a woman who had been betrayed and chose to respond not with tears or confrontation, but with a long game that dismantled her betrayers piece by piece. There was a poetic justice in it, a satisfaction that I could appreciate even as it disturbed me. But another part of me, the part that still remembered the sister who cried over dead birds, who believed in love stories, who trusted me to keep her safe, mourned something I couldn't name. A version of Megan who might have existed if the world had been kinder. If Derek had been honest, if I'd been paying closer attention. We were both different now, harder, warier, more careful about who we let close. I wasn't sure if that was a loss or a lesson. 6 months after the divorce, I moved to Portland, not for any particular reason, not running from anything. I just needed somewhere new. A city without memories, without ghosts, without the constant risk of running into Laura at the grocery store or Derek at the coffee shop. Portland was far enough to feel like a fresh start, but close enough that I could visit my parents when they needed me. I found an apartment near the waterfront. Small, clean, with big windows that let in the gray Pacific light. I started running in the mornings, something I'd never done before, and discovered that I liked the rhythm of it, the predictability, the physical exhaustion that quieted the noise in my head. I didn't date. Didn't want to. The idea of opening myself up to someone, of trusting again, of believing in the story that two people tell each other when they're falling in love. It felt absurd, like a con I'd already fallen for once and couldn't be fooled by again. I worked, I ran, I cooked simple meals and read books I'd been meaning to read for years. I called my mother on Sundays and my father on Wednesdays, and Megan whenever she picked up, which wasn't often. She was busy with her new life, traveling, starting a business, doing whatever people did when they suddenly had more money than they knew what to do with. I was alone, but I wasn't lonely. There's a difference. Loneliness is the ache of wanting connection and not finding it. What I felt was more like solitude, the deliberate choice to step back from the world, to exist in my own quiet space, to stop reaching for things that might cut me when I grabbed them. It wasn't happiness, but it wasn't unhappiness either. It was something in between, a plateau, a holding pattern. I told myself it was enough. The email from Megan came in October, almost a year after the wedding. Can we talk? Not on the phone, in person. I'm flying out next week if you're free. I stared at the message for a long time. We hadn't seen each other since the holidays. A stilted Christmas dinner at our parents' house where everyone pretended not to notice the tension, the unspoken things that hung in the air like humidity. She'd seemed fine, confident. The Megan who'd orchestrated everything, who'd played the long game and won, who'd emerged from her marriage as the clear victor. But there was something in the email, some undertone I couldn't identify, that made me uneasy. I wrote back, I'm free. She arrived on a Tuesday. I picked her up at the airport, and we drove to my apartment in near silence, the radio filling the gaps where conversation should have been. She looked different, thinner maybe, or just more drawn. The confidence I remembered seemed muted, replaced by something more tentative. Nice place, she said when we got inside, looking around at my sparse furniture, my bare walls, my life reduced to essentials. It's not much. It's clean, calm. She smiled weakly. I like calm. I made coffee. We sat across from each other at my small kitchen table, and I waited for her to tell me why she'd come. I wanted to apologize, she said finally. For what? For everything. For not telling you about Laura sooner. For using you as part of my plan without asking. For letting you walk into that coat room without any warning. I didn't respond. The coffee was bitter, burnt, but I drank it anyway. I told myself it was for your own good, she continued, that you needed to see it yourself or you'd never believe it, that I was protecting you by waiting, by making sure the truth was undeniable. She looked down at her hands. But that wasn't all of it. Part of me was angry at you too. At me? You brought her into my life, Marcus. Laura. She was your wife, your choice, and you never saw what she was. Never noticed the way she looked at Derek. Never questioned why she suddenly wanted to be so close to me. Her voice caught. I blamed you a little for not protecting me, the way you always said you would. The words landed like stones. I felt them settle in my chest, heavy and cold. I didn't know, I said. I know you didn't. But it didn't matter. Not then, like I was so focused on my plan, on making them pay, that I didn't stop to think about what it was costing. You, me, our relationship. She looked up, and her eyes were wet. I won, Marcus. I won everything. The money, the house, the satisfaction of watching Derek's life fall apart. But I don't feel like I won. I feel empty. I feel like I spent 2 years becoming someone I don't recognize, and now I don't know how to go back. I thought about the sister I remembered. The one who believed in things fiercely, completely. The one who saved birds with broken wings. Maybe you can't go back, I said. Maybe none of us can. Is that supposed to be comforting? It's not supposed to be anything, it's just true. She laughed. A short, sad sound. When did you get so wise? I'm not wise, I'm just tired. We talked until the light faded, about our parents, about our childhoods, about the things we remembered differently and the things we'd somehow both forgotten. We didn't talk about Derek or Laura, not directly, but they were there, present in their absence. Shadows that stretched across every topic we touched. By the time darkness fell, something had shifted between us. Not reconciliation exactly, not forgiveness, but an understanding, a recognition that we'd both been changed by what happened, and that there was no point in pretending otherwise. I'm selling the house, she said as she was leaving. Derek's house. It's too big, too full of memories. I'm going to travel for a while, see the world, try to figure out who I am now that I'm not the woman who was betrayed, not the woman who got revenge, not the woman who won. That sounds healthy. Sounds terrifying, she smiled. But maybe that's the point. At the door, she hugged me. It was awkward at first. We'd never been a physically affectionate family, but I let myself hold her anyway. My sister. The only one I had. The only one I would ever have. I love you, she said into my shoulder. I love you too, Meg. I'm sorry. I know. She pulled back, wiped her eyes, and walked to her rental car without looking back. I watched her drive away, watched the taillights disappear around the corner, and then I went inside and sat in the dark for a long time. A year passed, then 2. I started dating again. Cautiously, a few dinners, a few conversations, nothing that stuck. I wasn't looking for love, didn't trust myself to recognize it anymore, but I was looking for something. Connection, maybe. Proof that I was still capable of opening up, even just a little. I made friends at work, joined a running club, started therapy, which helped more than I expected. The therapist was a middle aged woman named Ruth who had a gift for asking questions that cracked me open before I realized what was happening. We talked about trust, about betrayal, about the difference between protecting yourself and building walls so high that no one can ever reach you. You experienced a trauma, she told me once. Multiple traumas, actually, the betrayal itself, but also the loss of your narrative. The story you told yourself about your life, your marriage, your family, it wasn't true. And having to rebuild from that kind of foundational collapse takes time. How much time? As much as you need. It wasn't a satisfying answer, but I was learning to accept unsatisfying answers. Learning that some questions don't have clean resolutions, that some wounds don't fully heal. They just become part of you, scar tissue that changes the shape of who you are. I thought about Megan's wedding sometimes, the coat room, the wink, the moment when everything split into before and after. It didn't hurt the way it used to. The memory had been worn smooth by repetition, like a stone in a riverbed, and now it was just a fact. Something that had happened, something that had made me who I was. I wasn't grateful for it, but I wasn't destroyed by it either. I was something in between. Laura reached out once, about 3 years after the divorce. An email. Short, apologetic. She'd moved to Phoenix, gotten remarried, had a baby. She wanted me to know she was sorry for what she'd done, that she thought about it sometimes, that she hoped I was happy. I read the email 3 times, and then I deleted it. Not out of anger, not even out of lingering hurt. I just didn't have anything to say. She was part of a life that no longer felt like mine. A chapter that had ended, a story that had concluded. Reopening it would serve no purpose except to pick at scars that had finally faded. I didn't wish her ill. I didn't wish her well. I simply didn't wish her anything. She was a stranger now. Megan and I grew closer in the years that followed. Not in a dramatic, transformative way. We didn't become best friends. We didn't call each other every day or share every detail of our lives. But there was an honesty between us that hadn't existed before. A mutual recognition that we'd both been through something, that we'd both survived, that we were both still figuring out what came next. She settled in Barcelona eventually, started a small business consulting firm, dated occasionally but never seriously. She seemed calmer when we talked, more at peace, though there was still a wariness in her that I recognized because I saw it in myself. Do you regret it? I asked her once on a video call late at night. The plan, the revenge, all of it. She thought about it for a long time. Sometimes. Sometimes I wish I'd just walked away. Let them have each other. Let the money and the house and the satisfaction go. But, but then I remember his face when he realized what I'd done, the way his lawyer scrambled, the way Laura looked when she understood that she'd been outplayed by someone she'd dismissed as naive. She paused. And I don't regret it. I can't. It was the only power I had, and I used it. Maybe that makes me a bad person. Maybe it makes me human. I don't know anymore. I didn't know either. But I was tired of judging myself, Megan, everyone who'd ever made a choice they weren't proud of. We were all just people, stumbling through lives we didn't fully understand, trying to survive the betrayals and disappointments that came for us all eventually. I'm glad you're okay, I said. I'm glad you're okay too. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't absolution. It was just two people who loved each other, acknowledging that love was complicated and messy and didn't always look the way you expected it to. It was enough. I'm 42 now. I live in a different apartment, bigger, with a small garden that I've learned to care for. I'm still in Portland, still running in the mornings, still going to therapy, though less often now. Ruth says I've made progress. I think she's right. I've been seeing someone for the past 8 months. Her name is Elena. She's a veterinarian who lives 3 blocks away, and we met because her dog got loose and I caught him in my garden. It's not a dramatic love story. There were no sparks, no instant connection, no moment where the music swelled and I knew she was the one. Just two people who kept showing up, kept talking, kept finding reasons to see each other again. I told her about Laura, about Megan's wedding, about everything. She listened without judgment, asked a few questions, and then said, "That sounds incredibly hard. I'm sorry you went through that." That was it. No advice, no solutions, just acknowledgement. I think I might love her. I'm not sure. I don't trust the word anymore. Don't trust my own ability to recognize the real thing versus the performance. But I like who I am when I'm with her. I like the quiet mornings and the easy silences and the way she laughs at things that aren't particularly funny. Maybe that's enough. Maybe that's everything. I think about the wedding sometimes. Not the coat room, not Laura, not Derek, but the ceremony itself, the vows, the applause, the moment Megan walked down the aisle looking like she believed in something beautiful. I think about how easily we convince ourselves that the stories we're living are real, how desperately we want to believe in the fairy tale, even when the evidence is right in front of us. I was blind. That's the truth I've had to make peace with. I was blind because I wanted to be, because the alternative was too painful, because seeing clearly would have required me to dismantle a life I'd worked hard to build. Megan saw clearly. That was the difference between us. She took off the rose-colored glasses and looked at the world as it was, and she decided to act. I can't say I would have done the same thing. I can't say her way was better or worse than any other way, but I understand it now. Sometimes clarity is a gift, sometimes it's a weapon, sometimes it's both. The last thing I want to say is this: I survived. Not triumphantly, not gracefully, not in a way that makes for a satisfying story with a clear moral and a neat resolution. I survived the way most people survive the worst things that happen to them: messily, incompletely, with scars that still ache when the weather changes and questions that will probably never be answered. But I'm still here, still getting up in the morning, still finding reasons to care about things, to try, to believe that maybe the next chapter will be better than the last. My sister is happy, or something like it. My ex-wife is a stranger. The man who betrayed us both lost everything he thought mattered and probably learned nothing from it. The world kept turning, indifferent to our small dramas, and we all had to figure out how to keep turning with it. That's not a lesson. It's just life. And life, I've learned, doesn't owe you anything. Not explanations, not closure, not the satisfaction of seeing the bad guys punished and the good guys rewarded. It just gives you days, one after another, and leaves you to decide what to do with them. I'm still deciding. I'll probably be deciding for the rest of my life. But for now, today, I'm okay with that. I'm okay with the not knowing, the in between, the questions without answers. I'm okay with being a man who was broken and put himself back together in a different shape, who lost something precious and found something else in its place. I'm okay. And sometimes that's everything.